Hi, my name is Gabriel Zada. I'm a professor of neurological surgery at the University of Southern California in Los Angeles. And on behalf of the AANS and in particular the history section of the AANS, I'm very proud and honored today to be able to present this interview with my boss, my mentor, someone who I've learned so much about neurosurgery and life from, Dr. Steve Giannotta. Dr. G, as we call him so fondly, hails from Detroit, from humble backgrounds, and went on to the University of Detroit and then to the University of Michigan, where he completed his medical school studies and his residency, became interested in vascular surgery. After that, he came to Southern California for a couple years and then got recruited by Dr. Marty Weiss into the Department of Neurosurgery in the early 1980s. Over the last 4 decades or so, Dr. G has become a luminary in the field of skull-based surgery and vascular surgery. He's had so many contributions to the field, whether it be to aneurysm surgery, acoustic neuroma surgery, trigeminal neuralgia, etc. And I can say as one of his trainees that so much that I learned and use about cranial and skull-based surgery is directly derived from Dr. G. Easily one of the best technical surgeons I've seen, if not the best. Beyond that, though, Dr. G has grown the program at USC after taking the helm from Dr. Weiss into by far one of the best educational training grounds in the United States, and to an amazing academic, clinical, research program that has had so many contributions and has grown immensely over the last several decades. Dr. Giannotta has had an amazing career in organized surgery. He served on the board of directors of the AANS, CNS exec board. He's been president of the ABNS, president of the Academy, president of the Senior Society, and his contributions to resident training, which I think is one of the favorite things he does, has been beyond comparison. He's one of the coolest people to hang out with, and he's changed my life in so many ways, as he has so many of our trainees. And it's an honor to be able to sit down, have a candid conversation with someone who's such a giant in the field, and at the same time, such an easy person to have a chat with. So I'm very honored to present this interview with Dr. Steve Giannotta. Dr. Giannotta, thank you for agreeing to do this interview for the AANS and the viewers out there about leadership. And you've been a leader of our department for 2 decades almost, and my mentor, and I'm proud and honored to have trained with you. And so we want to dive into a conversation, and we'll go about 20 or 30 minutes here. And I first want to ask you, what got you interested in medicine and neurosurgery?
Well, first of all, I'm happy to do this for the AANS, but I'm doing it for you, man. You know that.
Thank you.
What got me into medicine? Okay, that's a long story actually, with a lot of speed bumps along the way. But I always wanted to, I grew up in Detroit, and we ate, slept, drank, thought about, and fooled around with cars. That was all I knew about when I was a kid. So I thought I wanted to be a mechanical engineer. Unfortunately, I took some, we didn't call them this back then, but I took an AP course, calculus in high school, and I rolled a B. So that wasn't very good. So, and then to add some more pain to it, I didn't take it for credit, so I took it again in college, and I rolled a B again in college. So I said, okay, I need plan B now. So of all things, in high school history class, the teacher started talking about psychoanalysis. And because of my background as a backyard mechanic, trying to keep the pieces of junk that I would buy running so I could get from point A to point B, I recognized that I was an easy fix guy. If the easiest way to fix something was the best. And when he started talking about psychoanalysis, and you thought, wow, you can talk to somebody and fix their psychiatric problem, I'm in. That's what I want to do. I want to be a psychiatrist. So I had already applied to University of Detroit. I was in the engineering undergrad class. And when I got to campus that day, I had to look around and try to find the pre-meds because I found out you had to be a doctor to be a psychiatrist. Anyway, what then happened is summers I was working in the emergency room at Detroit Receiving Hospital. And the consultants would come down to the ER, and here's where the role modeling starts to take over. The psychiatrist would come down, and I'm looking at those guys kind of out of the corner of my eye, and I'm thinking, no. And then the cardiac surgery resident would come down, and he was this handsome Asian American guy. And in Detroit back then there were hardly any Asian American. I'd never even seen an Asian American guy. This guy was the coolest guy in the world. And I thought, okay, cardiac surgery, that's where I'm headed. But then when I got to medical school, I had ended up with some neurosurgical mentors, including the residents in Neurosurgery, Michigan, and here I am.
Amazing. And correct me if I'm wrong, you worked on an assembly line or in a factory for automobiles at some point?
From the time I was a sophomore in high school till the time I was a sophomore in medical school.
Wow.
All my free time. Summers, holidays, weekends. I had a benevolent boss who was the father of my best friend, and he made sure that the doors of the factory were open. Basically, this is the only way I could put myself through my education was to make my own money, and he, God bless him, made sure I made some money.
Wow. And were there lessons you took from that experience and hard work for the rest of your career or life?
Yeah, one lesson was don't get your hand so close to the crimping machine, because that's where my hand ended up one day, and I was in the emergency room. Yeah, and he was. My father never disciplined. No, that's probably not true. My father never disciplined me, but he did. He said, "I'm responsible for making sure you're a doctor someday. If you stick your hand in there again, you're fired." He
knew where you were headed.
Yeah, he knew I was headed. Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah.
So obviously you trained at a prestigious program with a lot of legacy, the University of Michigan. And what was it about that program, or maybe you could tell us about some mentorship, or who did you look up to when you started residency training at that time?
Well, so the first person I looked up was Richard C. Schneider, who was interesting. It wasn't a department back then. He was a member of the surgery department, but he was the chief of neurosurgery. So he was a iconic guy. Filled the room with his personality, et cetera, et cetera. So so we would keep our eye on him. And he did a thing where he would bring patients into our second year neurobehavioral class and sit them on a dais and interview them. And of course, they were these very grateful patients, and they had brain tumors that big, and they were all coiffed and dressed, and then one lady who was the wife of a steel magnate, when he was ushering her off the stage, she grabbed the microphone and said, "I just want to tell all you medical students that this is the greatest guy. He saved my life," and handed them and walked out. And I said, "Okay, I'm in." Yeah, so that's how that started. But my real mentor was a fellow named Glenn Kint. Glenn was an understated guy. Ended up being chairman at Colorado for many years, and he got me interested in vascular neurosurgery, and I owe him everything. He just died about a year or two ago, but what a wonderful man, great father, great husband, what a heck of a role model.
So did he become your role model early in residency or later, or when did you decide that vascular surgery was going to be, what you want to do mostly?
Yeah, he was my role model, and a number of us residents gravitated towards him. He was just he had a lot of the qualities of a great human being and a father figure. Residents' best interest at heart. I think that's probably where I maybe learned it. And so, cranial neurosurgery and vascular neurosurgery was of an interest of mine from probably second year residency on.
Mm-hmm. So obviously you came to Los Angeles after, and you were in another program for a couple years, and then Dr. Weiss recruited you here at USC in, I want to say, the early 80s. Is that about right?
Yeah, that's about right. Yeah, we won't even mention that other program. That was a couple of dark years of my life. But yeah, I got this call one day. Hey, Steve, this is Marty. I said, Marty? He said, yeah, Marty Weiss. He said, I didn't want to tell your secretary my last name because I figured you probably wouldn't take my call. Typical Weiss.
Typical, yeah, exactly.
I said, oh, you're that Dr. Weiss. He said, yeah. He says, I was talking to Dr. Kint, and he said and I was telling him I needed a vascular guy, and he said, Glenn said, geez, Steve Giannotta is just across town. Why don't you call him? So he says, so what do you think? And I said, what time can you take me? And that was the end of that.
So it was Dr. Kint who recommended you
connection.
to. Oh, that's a huge thing. And your big career trajectory change.
Yeah, it shows you how powerful your faculty can be if you still have a good relationship with them.
Absolutely. And still goes on to this day.
Sure does.
So looking back, we're going to look forward too, but you've been doing this for a couple of decades now as a faculty member, and obviously your career has grown to so many leadership positions. You've been at the helm of our department for 20 years. You trained me. When you look back at your career thus far, do you divide it up into any phases or chapters or anything you can impart to the people watching this into any way that you look back at your career?
Sure do. First 2 years of my career, I learned a lot of lessons the hard way. I was not happy, and I was not in a place where I could get any kind of mentoring or nurturing. And then came here with Dr. Weiss and watched Dr. Weiss build a legacy of national and international leadership. And it didn't take long before all of a sudden I was the editor of the newsletter for the Congress of Neurological Surgeons. And from there on, it was steady, accepting roles and taking responsibilities for that organization. And then our vascular section, and then ultimately on the board of directors of the FAANS, and basically kind of following his footsteps, and then RRC, and then ABNS, and you know that I try to propagate his legacy by asking you guys to step up in national leadership roles too, just to, at least if not anything else, to honor him, but also to burnish your own careers. And you need to build your network if you want to be successful in academic medicine.
Absolutely. Looking at Dr. Weiss as a leader, what do you think? What do you think is so unique about him and how he influenced you in your career?
Yeah, he looks upon, he wouldn't admit this, he looks upon the people that he's in charge of as analogous to his children, right? And I get a little paternalistic too, and sometimes that's not such a good thing. And but anyway, that's part of it. A lot of chairs and leaders of various departments are, it's all about them. And what I preach.
Yeah.
Those of you that are going to be chairs someday, you better be ready, because when you become a chair, it ain't about you anymore. It's about everybody else. And I have these conversations with our dean. She talks about servant leader, and we try to pick those out here at USC. And I've been on a lot of search committees. I'm on the search committee of for the ophthalmology chair right now, and those are the kind of people we're looking at. Because in that instance, there's a lot of young faculty in the ophthalmology department. They need nurturing, they need advocacy, they need advising and propagating their careers.
Well, knowing you, when I think about Dr. Giannotta, the things I think about and that I know you enjoy are golf, cars, obviously operating, which I know you love, but I would say even more than that is teaching and being with the residents, even if it's a lab or a cadaver lab or a skull-based lab. That's something that I always, when I think of you, I think that that's your sweet spot. That's something that you really enjoy and shine in. How do you look at that in let's say the last 10 years or so, in terms of a legacy that you want to leave behind, or is there anything you can talk to us about?
I don't know if I think about legacy. I think about selfishly what I like to do, and selfishly what I like to do, and it wasn't in the order necessarily that you brought them up, because I like to operate with the residents. That's my favorite thing.
Right.
And so you ask my golf partners. There have been many a Sunday when I call in. I said, "Hey, aneurysm just came into the county," and so, and they go, "I thought you were the boss." But yeah, I am the boss, but that means I get to do what I want to do. So yeah, I don't know if I think I don't think about it as a legacy. What I'm thinking about now is, what am I going to do when I'm not the boss anymore? And to the extent that I'm healthy, and the extent that the residents still want to have me help them with their cases, that's what I'm going to do.
I know they will. I have learned pretty much what I know about skull-based surgery and open surgery is from you, and hear your voice all the time in the OR and pass those lessons on to our trainees.
Yeah, that was another episode. We really didn't finish that topic, but it's about 1983, and obviously mostly doing vascular in terms of a discipline that I did research in and that I was relying upon for my academic progress. But I got contacted by a neurotologist in town who was doing acoustic tumors, and he didn't have anybody and he taught me a lot about lateral skull-base anatomy, just doing cases with him. And then the House Ear Institute group got wind of me, and then, as you know, for a number of years I was working with that group, and that was kind of the the heyday, the startup of cranial-based surgery with people like Vinko Dolence, who several of the buddies, Dacey and Art Day and Nick Hopkins and I went to behind the Iron Curtain and visited Vinko Dolence at the time. That was again the start of my interest in cranial-based neurosurgery. So I had these two intensely surgically complex disciplines, and that sustains me.
Yeah, that's great. And you've always talked to me over the years about your travel group and that tight group, and how that was really important in your career. Can you elaborate on that a little?
Yeah, I first heard of a travel club when I was a medical student. Richard Schneider was in a travel club, and Shelley Chu and Lester Mount and a whole bunch of people that nobody looking at this video are going to remember the names of were in that group. And they called it a travel club at the time because all of the guys, of course back then they were all guys, would go to each other's institution and spend a couple of days there, and maybe even go up to the operating rooms, and then of course they'd give talks and so forth. So I'm a fourth year medical student. I'm seeing all these luminary neurosurgeons hanging around, and I didn't even know what that was, but that was, quote, the boss's travel club. So fast forward, in the early 80s, several of us got together and started thinking about this, and after a few fits and starts, we ended up with 12 guys, most of whom were academicians, but not all of them. I think there were 3 of us that were in private practice, and basically it was like a network. And the people that were academicians that were in the group also were leaders nationally. And so over the years, we've all been chair of each other, if you know what I mean. People like Ralph and Art and so forth obviously have a legacy of leadership, and so yeah, if you want to be successful, you better have a network.
It's a good group to have a rising tide with, it sounds like, throughout the years. So do you have a favorite operation that you perform now or over the years?
Yeah. My favorite operation, I don't get to do many anymore. My favorite operation is middle cerebral artery aneurysm. That's my favorite operation. They're quick, they're fast, the anatomy's elegant.
I didn't know that.
Patients aren't sick.
I thought you were going to say a tick case is what I thought you were going to say, an MVD.
That's the lumbar disc of my practice, is trigeminal neuralgia, microvascular decompression. But I know, it's my favorite operation. Yeah, it's got to have some complexity and some mystery to it. But now I'm just backup call for subarachnoid hemorrhage, so I don't get to see many unruptured aneurysms anymore.
Sure.
Yeah,
that makes sense. And so let's talk a little bit about, I guess, where you see the program going or the future of neurosurgery, and what do you really want to instill in the next few years in our residents and faculty, and what do you see as the next decade looking like?
Well, as far as instilling the ideas to the residents, we kind of do that automatically here because of the work ethic that's demanded by being part of this training program. When you've got one of the unique aspects of a safety net level 1 trauma center as the main focus of your training program. Now, a lot of training programs have those hospitals, but obviously we're LAC USC. Mm-hmm. And so the sub-Is and the residents come here because of that. And so it's kind of automatic in terms of what you have to give up lifestyle-wise and so forth. And that's not what people do these days. They don't give up lifestyle. They focus everything else around their lifestyle. So we kind of do it automatically here, and we attract those kinds of residents that want to give. So that's an important part of this program as far as where neurosurgery is going in the future. You can answer that question way better than I can because of the science now that's involved as a substrate for what we do, and a lot of the things we don't do anymore because of the science. So I am a poor person to ask. I'm not a futurist like our former colleague Dr. Rapuzzo is, but clearly neurosurgical surgeon scientists are going to be making a lot of inroads into neurological disorders and even restoration of neurological function, and that's where the future is for our specialty.
Amazing. So in the last 2 decades as the boss, you've taken our faculty from around 10 or so to, I want to say, almost 30. Mm-hmm. You've taken our residency program from 2 to 3 a year. You've grown the research, you've grown the clinical practices. Is there something that you're most proud of thus far?
Well, I'm proud of you, and I'm proud of our faculty that have gone on to do things in terms of leadership. As you know, 7 of our grads were or are department chairs. One of our grads is former AANS president, so I'm proud of that. But I'm very proud of all of our resident grads, and no matter what course they've taken. As you know, 60% of our people do go into academic medicine, which is kind of unusual if you think about how many people are in academic medicine and neurosurgery. So, I don't claim to have a lot to do with it. It reminds me of 2 of my children were good athletes, and I'd be on the sidelines of their hockey game or their soccer game, and they would do something wonderful, and then all of the parents would come around me like I had anything to do with it, right? So I feel the same way about our residents and about our faculty that came through here. In fact, somebody told me they asked Glenn Kint when I was had left the residency, what'd you guys do to makes Steve so successful? And Glenn said, we just tried to get out of his way. And that was the philosophy that I have with you people.
Yep.
Just bring in the best people you can get here, residents, faculty, research people, and then just facilitate, get out of their way, and make sure they're successful.
Block and tackle.
Yeah.
Give them the football.
That's the job of the chair, as far as I'm
Absolutely.
concerned, anyway.
Yeah. I can see that in everything you do, for sure, with the trainees and faculty. So neurosurgery, in all its glory, is not always an easy specialty. And I'd love to know what are some of the challenges, and how do you mitigate them? What have you done to achieve balance over your career? I'd love to hear if you have any advice for younger trainees or neurosurgeons.
Yeah, well, maybe I know a little bit about that because I didn't always achieve balance, and I think that's, people have to kind of face that possibility. It's an all-consuming discipline, and it's unfortunately a tough lifestyle unless you can set it up for yourself to limit your practice and make sure that you have time for whatever, family, children, hobbies, whatever. And I admire a lot of my friends and a lot of the people in that travel club that we mentioned and do a beautiful, wonderful job of that. Mm-hmm. They have hobbies, they have things that they've accomplished outside of neurosurgery. I can't claim a lot of that. I don't have any other talents except this. And Sharon and I raised a great family. We have great kids, and Kathy had all their games and their piano recitals on my schedule. Mm-hmm. I would sneak out between cases and go to passing drills up at the high school because my son was a quarterback, and then sneak back to the OR. And you got to figure out a way. You got to figure out a way to have balance in your life. I don't have any sage advice at all about how to do it, except to do it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And historically, when you look back at recruitment, or is there anything that you've looked for in people that you look for as promising neurosurgeons, or any traits that you've come up with that?
Well, I have this little thing that we tell the recruits, right? They said, Dr. G, what characteristics are you looking for, in a good resident, and how do I know if I'm going to be a candidate here, and so on and so forth. And I tell them, look, this program is famous, maybe infamous, for quick starting your surgical education. You will have opportunities to make some decisions on your own relatively early in your career and do things on your own. And so we need people that have a strong ego and a heightened sense of their inadequacies. Because when you're a PGY1 or a PGY2 at County General Hospital and the neurosurgery service, it's like getting a Porsche for your 16th birthday. You know what that implies,
yes,
right? If your ego is so weak that you get caught up in the machismo that we know goes on over there, and you push something past where your skill set is adequate to do, somebody's going to get hurt. And those are the kind of people we need.
Who have that insight and ability to
and I characterize that as a strong ego, mm-hmm. so that they're not tempted by that ethic of, I can do this no matter what.
Absolutely. So we're going to start to wrap up here. I want to ask a question about organized neurosurgery and what it's meant to you over your career.
Well, as far as the Congress, I have a soft spot in my heart for that organization, and it ultimately became the secretary, which was always my goal in terms of leadership or service to an organization. Mm-hmm. So I'm proud of that, and I had that role in the cerebrovascular section. Mm-hmm. I had that role in the American board. Mm-hmm. And occasionally in those organizations, I did end up as the chair or the president or what have you, but I was always most comfortable as the ops guy, operations guy. Guy was in the background getting the stuff done so the president looked good and the chairman looked good and so forth. So that was always my goal. That was to me the fun part of leadership. Obviously, plus the people that I got to associate with, building your network. So not for everybody, but and you got to be willing to parse out your time, because it's what I tell our young people that come into neurosurgery. Neurosurgery is mostly time management if you want to do it right, and that goes back to lifestyle and so forth.
It speaks a lot to what I know about you, and you'll deny it, but about your humility. And you're not one who's gone after the spotlight a lot, I believe. But for those of us who know you and recognize how amazing you are in every way, you're up there with any surgeon leader internationally or nationally that anyone could ever pick out. And that's how we all feel about you and look at you. And I know you would never acknowledge that, but because you don't like being in the spotlight excessively. But so your humility speaks through, but we're not going to let you get away without knowing that we all feel that way about you.
Thank you.
Many people. The innumerable faculty you've trained who, as you mentioned, have gone on to do such great things, and the countless residents and medical students and other trainees that you trained thus far over the years. Really an amazing contribution.
That's the fun part of it.
Yeah, I look at your the things you've accomplished, as you mentioned, with the board, the RRC, board of directors, the AANS, CNS. I mean, it goes on and on. Founders Laurel Award, these amazing lectures that, and it's really so far just such an amazing career in neurosurgery. And,
yeah, they're all great honors. I appreciate that. And
on behalf of everyone watching out there, but really the people that you've directly influenced, and it's so many. I want to thank you for everything you've given me and my family and my cohort and my peers. It's really it's something that, as you know from your mentors, it's a great opportunity for me to be able to sit down with you and publicly thank you for everything.
Well, it's an honor.
My honor. So we'll wrap up here. Thank you, Dr. Giannotta, for your time today and for imparting all this wisdom and your experience, and I'm sure it's going to be very valuable to people.
Thank you, Gab.
All right, my pleasure.